Before I begin, I'd just like to preface and say that nothing I say about this game has not already been said before, and said to death at that. A lot of the clips that you'll see here are from my soul level 60 strength Flynn's ring, Lloyd's sword ring setup build that I made, and the clips may not be entirely relevant to what I'm going to talk about, but it's just good to have something in the background. That being said, I still think that this video will help me and maybe others reason through what makes this game worth it if I consolidate my thoughts in some tangible way. That being said, I'm going to rant about hit stun for several paragraphs now. I don't need to explain to any of you that Dark Souls 3 hit stun is a crock of shit. Anyone who's invaded has been struck by what we call the blender, which is any combination of 2 or more players' attacks resulting in stunlock to near instant death. Thus, invaders must separate any 2 players by some degree of space before they can even begin to approach a combat encounter. I didn't encounter too many ganks with this build as it was because, honestly, it's difficult enough to find invasions on PS4 now, and it's only going to get more difficult in the coming days. Now, I'm not going to pretend like the other Souls games did it so much better, because no, they didn't. Even in dueling scenarios, Demon Souls has dual katana stunlock to death, Dark Souls has infinite stunlock with the falchion, Dark Souls 2, I can't speak for, but I'm sure there's something silly in there. Dark Souls 3 has a pretty consistent 2-hit combo system with most weapons where any R1 will lead to another one, before the player can roll out and escape. This is immediately a problem. Anyone that can press R1 once can press it again, and double their damage output, which makes faster weapons with large hitboxes immediately better than anything slower, regardless of how much poise it has. Thus, any single R1 is equal to 2 in damage, because it'll always combo. This is the reason for the dominance of straight swords at all levels of play. They do incredible damage precisely due to the 2-hit combo, and would otherwise be unremarkable, but reliable, as the straight sword class is in every other title. Though there is another game with a more reserved hit stun system. Bloodborne, outside of scant few true combos, several of which are affected by latency, does not possess stunlock in the same way Dark Souls 3 does. Bullets will stagger you, but after any one attack, you're free to roll or quick step away. In my opinion, being hit once before being able to act feels like a more deliberate way to have an interaction, rather than watching as someone who nicked you with their sword gets their second hit and deals 40% of your health for free, all while holding you in place for a phantom to come along and do the same thing. Let it be known that Bloodborne PvP is not without its own issues, namely the insane amounts of damage rivaling Demon Souls, but still has this deliberative interactive spacing and movement game facilitated by a relative lack of stunlock. But this isn't about Bloodborne, it's about Dark Souls 3. Referencing a game of the same multiplayer principles with a vastly improved system allows us to compare and contrast what would have maybe made the game more enjoyable, more worth it. And besides, Bloodborne has enough differences from Dark Souls that comparing the mechanics of the two is quite difficult. For example, Bloodborne has no poise, outside of brief, fleeting moments of hyper armor on individual weapons. This Aldrich is right here to take his anger out on me because I did whack him with my hammer a couple times. The hammer as a rule is a little more difficult to co-invade with, just because the hitbox is so wide. It's not like hitting with a katana or a spear. It's more like it's like a vertical curved sword. Except that curved sword does strike damage, which is much more effective versus armor, and it breaks guards incredibly quickly. Now here's a situation where I could attempt to begin fighting these guys, but as you can see, any 2 R1s from this phantom will almost completely drain my health in this current state. So I'm just trying to get to a relative position of safety so that I can heal and then launch some kind of counterattack. And as you can see, the damage from the reinforced club is pretty good. I mean, it'll take about a third of this phantom's health in any 2 R1s. Also, it's fast enough to do chase downs and roll catches. And I'm able to finish off this host as I'm despawning, which is just funny. Now, it's my belief that the 2-hit stunlock combo was meant to be balanced by the presence of poise, a mechanic that relies exclusively upon your opponent aggressing into your attack. Poise weapons will have a higher damage on their 2-hit combo than a straight sword, but are substantially slower, sometimes almost twice as slow in the case of an ultra great sword or like a great hammer. But creating opportunities to attack with these weapons is miserable enough in a one-on-one experience, and frustratingly difficult in an invasion. This is not to say that it's impossible, just impractical, as even casual players can easily reaction roll the slow swings of an Ultra, with the added struggle of avoiding roll backstabs. Using a rolling attack on an Ultra is also pretty predictable, and worse, parryable. So unless your opponent's willing to walk up and swing at the same time you do, you're not very likely to win very many interactions. Now, with latency, yeah, you could probably get away with it. And people do get away with it. I just think it's a kind of crappy way to balance the weapon class. I mean, look here, you've got someone swinging around Gorm's Great Hammer, as if it's going to do anything. But it's not good enough to apply pressure, and it's not strong enough to take care of either of the invaders in this world, fast enough to keep them off of the host. It's a defensive tool that has a niche, and it has a use, but it is not a practical weapon to use in general. In practice, you can win plenty of invasions with Ultras, and a good enough player will do it. The real issue with the weapons comes with the stun-locking mechanics. It benefits hosts and phantoms significantly more than an invader. When you have even one phantom wielding one of these beasts, the incredibly high damage and risk is present, mostly due to the shockwave mechanic, which will stagger you for a duration that is almost equivalent to being hit by a weapon. Imagine an entire gang squad with them, or even one of them with a straight sword. That sort of invasion was not uncommon. If you'll take a look here, I found that this build was so powerful that it forces people to disconnect from the game. You can force people to reach over to their console and press the power button in real life with this build. I'll be honest, I really like Ultras. I mean, the niche the weapons fill isn't necessarily bad. They're built to tank hits that players may otherwise be unwilling or unable to avoid, and they do this one thing very well. But coupled with the 2-hit stun lock, it makes them far too dangerous in the hands of a phantom. And that really is what makes the Greatsword the ultimate invader weapon, or so it has become, because it has the hyper armor, coupled with a just fast enough moveset to be useful. And then on top of that, it does excellent damage. So the dominance of the Claymore, coupled with the S-Stock offhand, and even things like the Executioner's Greatsword, just straight up, even at this level, they work very well together. It's all the armor you could possibly need, coupled with a decent moveset and damage output. It's not to say you can't reaction roll a Greatsword, it's just it does more things than an Ultra ever will. You have so many more options with the Claymore as compared to the Astora Greatsword. And things like the Fume and the Zweihander are much better because of their rolling attacks. But things like the Greatsword are not quite as good. Namely because their rolling attack is a circular slash kind of deal. Which can be useful, but generally isn't as good as the poking rolling attack, which can be parried. The only reason I kept this invasion in was because my spacing was just fabulous. If there's one thing I think I can do pretty well, it's space my attacks. Maybe not reaction roll, maybe not avoid hits so much, but I can definitely hit with the very edge of all of my weapons. And at the very least, I'm pretty good at whiff punishing just outside the range of a lot of weapons, which is not the most consistent thing due to latency. So oftentimes you'll have to roll during the visual swing of an attack, even if it's well out of the visual range of where you're at. The pressure of the reinforced club is so great that I force him to roll right off the ledge, and now I have this guy to myself. And I took a chance on those painting Guardian Shivs, because I didn't exactly know how much health he had left, but I figured that of all things would finish him off, especially at soul level 60-ish. Speaking of options that are more dangerous in the hands of a host or a phantom, there's magic and the spells in the game. A host using Crystal Soul Spear, Sunlight Spear, or even the dreaded Chaos Bed Vestiges has more power over how you approach an invasion than anything else in the game. Because these spells operate on a different level of hit stun, Vestiges more so than the others, they effectively reset your current stun frames regardless of what other weapons may hit you, meaning that they combo to, from, and between the 2-hit combo of virtually every applicable weapon. Magic is already crummy enough for invaders to use because draining your already paltry Estus resources for scant few more casts is not appealing. Allotting stat points for attunement at any level below 100 isn't particularly palatable either, and for this reason few invaders ever do bother with it, and those that do may be met with resistance from co-invaders, who consider their wild spell slinging a liability to their own life and chances of winning. Now, I've only had a co-invader try to kill me a couple of times for using magic, and that does kind of suck, but like, you do sort of deserve it. It's incredibly difficult to control 90% of the spells in this game, especially with how crappy the lock-on is. So if you're a wizard in an invasion, and you're firing off Crystal Homing Soul Mass, and you're doing all sorts of bullshit with Soul Spears, and you're not just using, like, the bare minimum sorceries, you're putting other invaders at risk. You have to have a very fine control of when you use spells in an invasion. For example, these deacons are doing an excellent job spamming Fireball at the host while skillfully avoiding me. That's what we call accuracy. I'm gonna say it again. A good invader will use magic splendidly, and I've had plenty of wizard invasions of my own that were an absolute blast. In fact, the only build I'm considering revisiting now is a wizard that I made specifically despite these exact problems, using a combination of tools that are meta with the added bonus of some excellent sorceries for mid-range pressure. Namely, using the Moonlight Greatsword with a Crystal S-Stock in the offhand, and then the Witch Tree Branch, specifically to cast Deep Soul and Homing Soul Mass. And the idea is that you don't use those spells for damage so much as you use them to create a situation where if they hit, you can combo into the Crystal S-Stock or the Moonlight Greatsword, or both of them sometimes. And if they don't hit, then you create a situation where you can go for a roll catch with either of your weapons, and you have an advantage of frames. It's all about having the upper hand in the endurance department, and really controlling the action economy of your enemies. Even if they get hit by the spells and they see that they aren't taking that much damage, they'll start to tank those hits, and if they tank those hits, then they'll still take the hit stun from getting hit by the spell, which gives you an advantage to move up close to them. Is it a perfect build? No, of course not, but it's fun and it's effective, and that's what matters. None of my assertions are meant to invalidate or impede anyone's enjoyment of the game, but instead criticize and examine what does exist in some subjective capacity, for my opinion. Whatever it's worth. Invasions are supposed to be fun, for the invader and for the host, though oftentimes it can feel like we're torturing ourselves trying to find that fun, and a host may not be appreciative of you trying to murder them. We must remember that this is, first and foremost, a video game. A challenging one at that. Dark Souls 3 is a game specifically designed to push you out of your comfort zone and face the trials it pits you against in the manner you see fit, be it head-on or more tactically. And sometimes that challenge is another player that wants you dead. For others, their challenge is taking out a roving band of merry men with hammers and greatswords, just trying to get through the level. Whatever your torment may be, know that even in pain, there is joy. Thus, I conclude my forays into enemy territory, in Dark Souls 3 at least. Wounded, stun-locked, but ultimately satisfied.